Everyone got one of these packets, right, last time? Anyone need an extra copy? Stephanie, you need an extra copy or anything? Okay. And everyone has a copy of the agenda? Okay. All right. I do want to add one thing to the agenda for December. Do you have the agenda? For December, okay, December 10th, we're going to have Lou and Cindy. They're actually going to be here to take a look at your SLO. Okay? It should be written by then, so I'll set up when everybody will go in and spend that 10-15 minutes with them, and they should just be reviewing your paperwork. And December 16th is actually a Monday. That's the actual work session. That's when we'll be in here. So by the December 16th, I mean, we should be looking at your SLOs and getting them and just tweaking them by then.
But it should be written by the 10th, and then we'll work on it again on the 16th. Is that how?
Well, we'll kind of like review it maybe with each other, kind of go over any questions you might have about it. But it should be basically done.
By the 10th?
By the 10th is when we're going to have Lou and Cindy back over, and he's going to be, and I'll set up the sessions, like when you're going to be in. Okay? All right. And it's a weekend time. It's not like
finishing up time.
Right. It's like take a look. Let's just review. Okay. All right. And then they'll go to me if you have them done on December 16th. That day during our session, you can turn them in. Otherwise, they're due by that 19th before that break. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay. What we did last month was did an overview. We went to the ODE website and we just kind of found where the different parts were. If you had any additional questions, that's where the booklet came from. That's where an example came from. And then we went through part of the handbook that is in front of you. And then we talked about baseline and trend data. And what I decided to do today, okay, is kind of we're going to go over the intervals of instruction, standards and content, and assessment. But what I thought might help everyone, has everyone started writing their SLO? No? Okay. Okay. Well, what I'm excited to do today is I just went ahead and printed off the template. Okay? And then we can kind of review baseline trend data, what goes in that, what goes in student population, and then move into interval of instruction. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead. You take the template, and then I also printed off the template checklist. And then the last piece I have for you is I went ahead and if you didn't go to the website, there was a sample SLO for Career Tech, so I printed that off so we can kind of review back and forth. So we're not making it harder than it is, okay? So you should have 3 papers. And then I would take everything else and just kind of set it aside. Okay, set everything else aside and just have the template, checklist, and your example. Okay, at the top, baseline and trend data. Okay, what is baseline trend data? We kind of talked about it last month. What is it? What would you put in that box at the top?
You have to have a starting point. I mean, you have to have a starting point. So if in an ideal world, we could give the web exam twice. You give the web exam first, and that's your baseline. But we don't have a perfect world.
Right, it's like previous test
Yeah.
scores, it's the results of pre-assessments, it's the results of a first unit test. It's a starting point. It's like you need to know where the students are. Where's their starting point? Okay? And so on this checklist, these are the things that you'll use when you're writing your SLO on this checklist. And then this is what I'll use to approve it. Okay? So under baseline and trend data, it says what information is being used to inform the creation of the SLO and establish amount of growth that should take place within the time period. Okay, so the question is, okay, at the top, baseline trend data, you should have, you identify sources of information about students, their test scores from previous years, okay? Results of pre-assessment, so you'd be writing that. So if you notice in the example, it talks about baseline and trend data. All right. And what you can do, when I was looking at the example, and what you can do also, you can break those two apart, baseline and then the trend data. You can divide those two and discuss them. You can say, like, trend data. There are so many sources of student performance indicators. Collectively, you use previous exam score, GPAs. You may even use attendance for that piece or something. Okay?
Well, I was going to use the Lexa, but we don't call it Lexa, what, that reader. I gave my students that. And I was going to use that as my SLO, and because you can check them again, you can check them several mid-year and then at the end. Well, Paul told me that's not a good one to use because I can't prove that I'm the one who increased their reading skills.
Really?
That's what he told me. He said he wouldn't use that because I can't say that it was just my class that increased their reading skills.
Did all your students take the Lexa
Mm-hmm.
and use the Lexa?
Well, that's that reader.
Which is the Lexa?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I had like 3 of them that were second grade levels, and my target group was obviously the lower ones to try to jump them.
Okay. All right. Are you using pre-assessments, any type of pre-test?
Just the Lexa.
You're not going to use any other type of pre-assessment?
No.
But you have if you don't have the exact web exam, you should be able to break it down and have some type of pre-test.
But they said it has to be something that's generated not from me, but it has to be, isn't that true? That it has to be a state type test?
Well,
You can do baseline
You can do
data.
baseline testing.
You
The
can
data
baseline.
you can use your web exam to show the growth.
Right. Web exam.
What I did is I've got what I feel is pretty close to web exam that breaks down like employability, report writing, investigation. By then taking that pre-test, you have a pre-test score that should not be better than 60% even for your smartest students. So what I'm saying, you can use that as your baseline and compare it with their growth over here. You don't want to hurt yourself and you won't carry it like 100% on it. You want to have it down so that you can show growth. Does that make sense?
Okay, so we have a, excuse me, a state horse judging contest that is issued by the FFA. I mean, I have a copy of that test. I could give them that test as a pre-assessment.
To see where they are and then be able to
And then
discuss it.
and then at the end of the year, give it to them again to see their growth. Because they won't take the web exam until the end of their senior year.
Oh, okay, all right. So you need to have something else, because wouldn't you couldn't you do the growth as like mid-year and then, because everything has to be done by April. So, what's wrong?
Even for my students,
Uh-huh.
like looking at the vendor assessments that we would have to do towards the end for, for the assessment part of it.
Okay.
For pre-assessments, I mean, most of my students don't take these.
They don't take the compass, they don't
No.
take the web exam.
No.
Do they do a content pre-test or anything? Any type of
Yes, but
testing?
it's not either. It's not
But is it
state-approved.
based on your standards? and everything?
Yes,
Because that's what I was looking at.
but again, yeah. Maybe that's a different conversation.
Should I send you mine?
Yes, we did, you did.
Did you?
No, yes, you did.
But maybe we can just have that
Okay.
later.
All right. So basically, what you need to do in the first one, and we're just kind of doing a review, but we'll take as long as we need to take on these, okay? Get them right. Baseline trend data, divide them apart, trend data, and then baseline data. And then you have to do an analysis. You have to summarize, strengths, weaknesses. And what I was looking at on the sample, where you would have the student results of that assessment, the student results, and then your baseline score of that pre-assessment. Okay? So then you know where they're starting at.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah, you have to break it down.
Break it down, yes.
This many finished in this, yeah. Okay.
Right.
And that's what Lisa was on, so that.
Did, okay.
I just said it predetermined times that we're using that's on like measurement time, things like that, so I mean. And this is what they approved it during
They
my
did,
SLO
okay.
training, so.
Okay.
Because I have the one that they approved for. When we did the two, they were, when they were.
Thank you.
What's this one?
That's my stuff. The state already has looked
Thank
at.
you.
Okay.
That I passed originally, that was 2 summers ago though, so.
Okay, so let's change a little bit.
We finished it.
So then, as you go down into student population, okay, student population,
Yeah. I thought
and you talk about how many students are enrolled in this course. Okay.
Thank you.
And then the second part,
That's yours.
you got it?
That's the extra power I can hold. Just here.
Okay, student population, you talk about number of students enrolled in your course, okay? All right, and then within the population, several students may have special needs, and then you kind of break that down, okay? So many students are on IEP, for a specific,
And when you write for their IEP, you have to like have, I will provide these students with all assessment accommodations and modifications based on their individual education. So you had to have like a little
little
thing in there
bit.
saying that that would be covered.
So like what he, where's the example? I'm getting too many papers in front of me here. Student population, on the example. Okay, this plant and horticulture science course is offered both second and third period for the entire year. Okay, so that's student population. It's an elective course designed for sophomores. There are 20 students enrolled, in which 18 are sophomores and 2 are juniors. Okay, so you break your students down like that. Demographics of the students consist of 8 males and 12 females. Most of the students come from rural homes with few living within city limits. Talking about their range from very low socioeconomic backgrounds to high economic background. 10 students live with both parents, 4 come from single parent homes, 6 have step-parents. Ethnicity is mostly homogeneous in nature with the exception of 1 German foreign exchange student. 6 students are on IEPs, while all students, it talks about their GPA. All students are engaged in supervised experiences. So, I mean, you are explaining the demographics of your class. Okay. Okay. Does that all make sense? Okay. And I know there's going to be more questions as you start writing, because that's what we need to start doing, start getting into the writing part. Interval of instruction. Okay. That's pretty straightforward. It's the length of your course. Okay. Jim?
A question about, what I'm seeing is, like the subject I cover is a course in DC, and I have a pre-test already, which is exactly like the post-test, with a few numbers changed. So it's going to be a good mark to see the, after the completion of the 10 assignments, of what they achieved. But the interval, some of them do it in 8 weeks, and some of them take 3 months.
Let's talk about the course. What is the duration of the course that the SLO would cover?
That would be, we have our 2-year program, right?
Right, so, are you testing the juniors or the seniors on this one? Because right now, we only have to do, for this practice this year, it's 1 SLO, but next year, you'll probably have 2. Right? Right. And the length of your course is juniors and seniors, right?
Yeah, but this does how it
It's 2
does.
different courses right now, it's equine 1, equine 2,
Right.
2 courses.
Of course.
So if you
Yeah.
start with juniors, you're better off because you can save it for next year. If you start with seniors, then you have to redo it.
The one that you're doing for this year?
Right. What?
I still
What's-
don't know.
Well,
It would be your,
What-
no, it would be your equine, it would be your electronics class.
I understand, but it's not, to do that part, it's not a year interval.
The length of your course
Okay, so it's not the length.
is
of
an
what-
all
You just want to
year.
do it on a part of the course.
The kids that you're actually writing the SLO on.
But when is the
you can use it
assessment?
again and just tweak it for the next year.
Well, I understand that, but it doesn't have to be a year long.
No, it's not.
No.
But the length of your course is 1 year.
Right,
But
yeah.
this is asking the length of the assessment,
Now, what's the duration of the course that the SLO will cover?
the beginning and, so the SLO is the assessment.
If the SLO, you-
Well, it's
Beginning
the-
of the whole year.
April.
Right.
But there's a bunch of things in that, I mean, for a whole year, not just, the normal 8-week class or 9-week. There'll be 3 more different, so are you supposed to put in all 4 areas?
And it,
Or is it just supposed to be 1?
This is
Interval
just-
of instruction of
It was just
class.
generic of the whole,
Right.
the whole course. You teach a whole electronics
and
class.
it can't start on day 1,
And
is
it's-
that correct?
It's
Right.
for 1 year.
Typically, it'd be
You can start
October.
on day one.
I
You
thought
If
we
you
said-
gave your pre-assessment on day one, you
Yeah.
had all
You
your
can, but I
information.
wouldn't.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because they kind of said, wait, because that way people start late, so. Because I have, like, we did the one that they had approved a couple years ago, it was like started September 7th, ended May 1st.
Right,
but if you wait till October
that's if you do
to
the
do
winter.
your,
Pre-assessment.
I think you hurt yourself. I think you need to start off the first week. Why are they
People
saying?
know too
not-
much is what you're saying?
But, no, I've checked
You might
with-
not have kids that start for,
Well, I've checked with other criminal justice instructors that are doing the same thing that we're doing, and they're all being told to do it within the first week, because if you go through a lot of stuff in your first, let's say, 9 weeks, which you'll learn to October, not necessarily, I'm looking at you thinking.
Monday's New Year.
Yeah.
so then you taught them a lot of stuff already.
Well, you,
Right.
and you're helping them along and
Yeah.
your final
I see
results
that.
by maybe 10%. Do you see what I'm saying?
Because you
You're
got-
covering stuff, so you want to hit the beginning of your class
Mm-hmm.
where you haven't taught them anything so that you can show growth when you first came in contact. And I understand waiting, but not that long in certain cases or certain courses. I definitely don't. Example being, I've already covered all my military demeanor. That is one whole competency. And I would say 90% come in and do not know that. Then you get into each advanced, or we'll say each course that you do to match your curriculum. I think you're hurting yourself if you don't start in the first week.
Well, for like next year, you'll have seniors, so you will have given them their assessment in the springtime, correct? So you can take that.
Well, that's something I'm looking at is do I do my final assessment in January before they go out on to internships and job placement? Of course, I know I'm different than a lot of the programs here, but I guess that's kind of maybe something Tammy and I need to talk about later to see how far that we want to go with the assessment. Do we want to do the assessment at the end of the senior year and set up a different pre-assessment for their senior year? So I don't know why you're not doing assessment over, you have 1 and 2, so essentially we're the same when it comes to 1 and 2.
Well, what they're saying, at the end of their junior year, you're giving them a post assessment, that would be your beginning part for your
Right,
seniors.
For your seniors.
Right.
And then you
Take
test
that.
it.
And then you
Then you
do
can
an
do it.
SLO based on that, and where will their growth be for their senior year?
Senior year.
If you use that though, you're saying they're not gonna forget anything over the summer. So what you would leave them with at the end of their junior year, they're gonna come back with all of that
Or
knowledge.
you
and
give
you're
them,
not gonna have
give them back the
to
assessment.
So on the
And
top.
then you start at
Use
another
the final
pre-assessment,
assessment as a
as a
pre-assessment,
pre-assessment,
come to see what they did lose over the summer.
because they will lose stuff over the summer.
But I agree with you, you have to do this right, because you think about it, our first quarter's done, I mean, in the whole year, 25% of the class is over with. So 25% of our instruction's over with.
But it depends what you're writing the SLO on. If you're
That's
doing
true.
a unit, it doesn't matter when you actually do it. You could do that unit in April, as long as you can get through the whole unit, because you're just pre-assessing that unit. So it doesn't matter when you do it. If you want to do the whole year, then yeah, start at the beginning, but it's not based on a year. If
You
want
could
it
give
to
them a
be.
chart with all the, like a horse diagram in the beginning of October. Say you're starting that unit on the horse muscles boat, I don't know what, I'm just,
Parts of the horse.
right, so you give that to them at the beginning of the unit in October, and then you go through that unit in October and November. So at the end of November, you give them the same assessment, and you can see where they were in October and then where they were at the end of your unit. So your assessment could literally be within those 2 months.
But can you use that then to report on, considering it's not?
Well,
Well,
that's
it
the thing,
depends.
it has to be
State of-
budgeted.
Well, I'm not saying
It has
that,
to
that
be, but no,
particular
but-
thing,
Yeah,
but.
so like, Mary would have to sign off
Sign
and
off.
say, yes, that is reflective of the whole year of
Right.
what they do. So I don't know if that.
And I think it's gonna be so hard to find that state type test, you know, because they keep saying it has to be something that we don't generate ourselves.
It doesn't have to be.
Then,
It has to be
like Stephanie, what are you using for yours? You said all pre-assessments would be given at the beginning of each grading quarter and post-assessments. So what assessments are you using?
Well, that's, I mean, we were supposed to be vague on it just because we didn't know at that time. We
Okay.
weren't allowed to use our own assessments. They were supposed to have all the bioscience for the state of Ohio get together and create one assessment for that program, for the units. So then that's what we were gonna run with for the actual pre and post assessments for the units. I don't think that they're doing that anymore because I think that they're realizing it's impossible, right?
Well,
So
different
they're-
like landscape has done it. Did your group do it, Randy, in networking?
I know we just did the item writing, but that's
Some-
for
some-
the
some
web
people-
exam.
Some groups have done it, some
Okay.
groups not. To answer your question, the bigger the test, the more valid it is if you're ever challenged, okay? So if you, what I would recommend is that you use questions written by the textbook company or somebody, because those have been validated in some way. And then you have another equine teacher kind of sign off on it, that it's a valid, you know, that you're just
Okay, it's
not
something I
making
can
it-
generate, but another equine teacher needs
Right, then
to.
it has to be, I mean,
Somebody has to validate it.
right, because that's what I was saying. You individually, the teacher can't create their own test. It's got to be done in conjunction with another person
The teacher
in
can
that.
create it, but they can have it signed off by somebody.
Right.
Oh, well, see, that's not, see, when I was up there, I didn't get that, I just kept hearing that it has to be a valid state type test.
And if it is, like if web exam has one, we want to use that,
Right.
because, and you would want to use it, then you have
Absolutely.
to create it. But then you don't have to answer the question, well, there's a valid test and you're not using it, why?
It's kind of like paying your taxes. You don't want them to come back on you.
Is there any possibility of us getting the web exams that we can do
They're working on it.
Okay.
And they'll let you, you just have to contact whoever the administrator is for that one. Because like I've contacted them and I'm taking my kids down either November, December-ish to take the pre, because they've never had any students take the bioscience one yet. And then they'll take it this spring again. So you just have to get a hold of them and see for whoever is designing that section of it. But Tammy, do you have that information? I know Dale did.
Yeah, Mayor should have it.
Well, I know that,
When did they pass?
I know that if they take the test, if they take a web exam, a part of a web exam, and they do not pass it, they can take it again their senior year.
Right. They can take it as many times as they want. That's not something that.
No, no.
Is it once? Why are they wanting to
What's
do
the
it?
Probably because maybe it's a new test.
Yeah.
And it
okay.
costs money
That is-
too.
Yeah.
It's, There's a cost every time they take it.
How much is it?
Well, I don't know what the cost
They didn't
is,
say
they
what
have
it was gonna- I
it,
don't
they
know
have
what
it,
it was.
Stephanie's in a test group, so
You're
hers,
special.
they're just rolling that out, so everybody doesn't have that. But they are gonna charge us for a pre-assessment when they're done.
But they don't know
But
when
they're
they'll
not
be done.
Different people's will be done at different times, just like, you know,
Okay.
just like the tests are rewritten, Josh's should be done soon. Since it's on the rewrite,
Yes.
electronics should.
I mean, I just, that's what,
Rewrite.
that's the only thing I'm, like, who writes the assessment? And like you said, I can write the assessment, but it has to be, you have to okay it, and then another equine instructor should approve it. Okay.
Okay. So if I was working on skills, like job skills, like social pragmatics, and I write my SLO on that, and I come up with, a pre-assessment, you would just need to look over to approve it, and then
And Kelly-
at the final
Kelly-
assessment.
Kelly does, yeah.
Okay, but
Yeah.
somebody will in the building or wherever.
Could we
Since
use
our
our,
program is a lot different
With
than.
your supervisor, yeah.
could we
Great.
use our advisory
Okay.
committees for that? Would they be valid people to approve those?
To approve your, I guess you have
The
to
assessment.
say,
That's just the one.
What their field is.
yeah,
What
what the
their
field
field is.
and how they.
I'm just wondering, what are they gonna come back on
I'll give
and
you a
say
shiny
that
board.
wasn't valid? You know what I mean, if they're gonna do that?
Well, they can, it's not gonna be them, well, there's gonna be a couple things, there's gonna be auditors who come in and look at it.
Right.
So if an auditor comes in and they pull Joe's out, and Joe has, a whole, easy questions about a horse, and then, or really hard questions, and then the last one's easy, then they're gonna say that that's not valid. Or the other person that could challenge it would be a parent
Okay.
or another staff member, because when you
Where
get
does it
your
come from?
rating that says Stephanie's accomplished and Mark is, developing, and he's gonna say, wait a minute, I gave him a valid test and she gave him an easy test. So, I mean, there's gonna be a lot of challenges that happen. You just have to feel in your heart that, if somebody comes knocking at my door, Mary needs to know, she's the one who's gotta push the button that
Right.
says,
It's approved.
it's approved, and this is what they got, and this shows, 10 people got above average, and, however many people got average. But it'll be challenged, I don't know if it'll be in our district, or, whatever district, you just need to feel comfortable with what you're putting down is,
And be able to defend.
and be able to defend it.
Okay, now I understand. So I can pretty much take a lot of my course judging contests and the questions that I know that's on the web exams, because I got to review it, and come up with a test, have Mary okay it, and then have another equine person okay it.
And I don't think there's gonna be a problem, because as long as you keep your test in line with your curriculum and your standards, there's not gonna be a problem with getting it approved. I just still think, and I'll just reiterate what Paul said, is you don't wanna set yourself up for failure. You don't want too high expectations with your percentage that you expect them to get to begin. That makes sense?
Yeah, but you don't want it too low
You mean,
either.
You're
Well-
saying, don't set it to like, okay, they're gonna grow 50%.
No, I'm
Oh,
saying.
then we're gonna have 100% on this test. by the
100% on
time they
this test,
graduate.
right.
Exactly, 100% is something you don't want to do, because you need to show growth in those students. You certainly, like you say, don't make it too low,
Well,
but
you
you
can
make
put-
it within reasonable, because you got your,
Like 20%.
yeah, you got your pre-assessment test that
Mhm.
You
she's
can
gonna
put
have
40% growth from the
to know.
baseline data, so one person might only be getting a 65%, but because they only started out at a 10%. Or the other people might have started out at 65, so you're gonna look at 35% growth, so it's,
Yeah, or you're saying, okay, now, everyone didn't pass, the web exam, whatever, and the baseline for the web exam is this percentage, and the highest score, okay, this many people, or this group will make that baseline. Because you're gonna divide them into groups based on their pre-assessments, this group, and then say, okay, this group is gonna meet that baseline, okay, of passing the web exam. This group is going to be, 15% more, okay? Based on what your pre-assessment is.
Is this where it comes that you don't do the total amount of students as 100% of your students? Where like if you have a student come in and he scores a 90% on your pre-assessment, and yeah, you'll show 10% growth if he gets 100%, but isn't this where they're talking about not evaluating all the students, you throw out the top numbers, or did I hear that someplace?
You can make a note. I worked on one, science teacher had someone who got a 93% on their pre-assessment. So there's no way you can get 10% growth,
Right.
you know, so you would just note that or put them in a group of their own,
Okay.
you know.
Okay.
Really, any growth you're showing to but that's where the Lexile comes in as important, is that if she has students who test on a second grade reading level, you're not going to expect
Right.
their growth to be the same as if you have students who have a post-secondary reading level.
So I can do a pre-assessment, one thing, I can do the pre-assessment at the beginning of their junior year, and at the end of their junior year, I can go ahead and give them that web exam. They're not going to score as high as they will at their senior year, but they're still going to show growth.
Exactly.
You don't have to give them the same, you don't have to give them the same assessment, just as long as you're showing growth.
Right.
And it's aligned to the same standards.
Exactly. Okay. All makes sense now? Because, we kind of jumped ahead because we already jumped into assessments. So we've already been talking about that. And then the standards and content is one of the boxes we're talking about. What content with the SLO target, okay? To what related standards? And basically what you put in, put in that box is standards content for the SLO based on what's your source, okay? Common Core standard, ODE standards, it's based on what? What standard? Okay? Certification standards for,
Wait a minute. So the way this is reading, so that what we've turned in are all of our standards and how they line up and things. Well, you know who wrote mine? Me. State doesn't have anything for us.
No, they give you a standard. There's equine standards.
No, they do, but no, not like what I teach. There's not really standards for equine. There really is not, there's not really that many standards for equine. There really isn't.
Well, you have your content standards that you've done your web exam
Yes,
on.
but-
Those are the ones that.
That I need to, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
those are the
easy.
ones
That's a
you
whole lot less than what I teach.
So if we don't, I mean, no, it doesn't matter, I'm pretty sick when I say we don't do anything near a web exam, but, well, like you said,
you have state standards, right? No.
Modified.
Yes. Well, because like the stuff that, the culinary standards, which they had originally took them from, it's like prepare eggs, and it lists like 60 kinds of eggs, but, we have like prepare eggs.
Too.
Prepare
eggs.
Yes.
Get it out of the container while we're Well, you were saying, Tammy, that it has to show, your growth has to cover, what you do over a year's period of time, where, you're not gonna do an assessment where my kids go in and cook like, in a whatever time period, like cookies and cakes and, because they've done that throughout the year.
Right.
Or we would be assessing more like measuring and temperature and
More
things.
specific.
But it's
More-
still what they've learned through the year, right? You've just applied it in different situations.
Yes, so it's been learned throughout the year, but sometimes it takes the year, so it's just.
You can see growth in your students, from day one.
Oh, yeah.
I've already
Yeah.
seen growth
They're
because
not
now they're
making
cooking
anymore.
on the stove.
They're dressed.
Day one, I wouldn't put them anywhere near the stove.
Yeah.
Okay, now they have live flame that they're cooking with, so, you've,
No,
They've
absolutely,
shown,
and you can't write down this, like with Trevor's growth, we're going from changing in front of the locker to changing in the bathroom.
well, that's not gonna be your SLO.
No, but I'm saying,
Changing out in the hallway.
but that is a lot of
That is a
growth.
lot of growth.
But it's gonna be, with my SLO,
But that
I think
growth
we did a
would
lot
have to be
of, right,
related
social,
to-
it would be
But you would have, but then.
job readiness, because you cannot walk around and work.
But again, an SLO to rate for job readiness is so, it's, even for
Being
any
appropriate.
pragmatics or any job appropriate skills are so subjective. Do you know what I mean? So,
Well, and that's why mine has to be
Those-
broke down into 12 students, each student has gotta be broke down into
where their levels are, what their disability
Right.
is, you just gotta take it down, so.
So here,
Kelly
here's,
will help you with those because she's
Yeah.
done those at Pauline T.
Okay.
for the next meeting, here's what I think we should do, okay? Instead of like just constantly revisiting, trend data, baseline, all the information, let's bring those pieces back, okay? Because we're gonna move into, for next month, we're still, doing growth targets, rationale, administration, scoring. I can do, discuss that piece, but I think we need to bring a working draft back to the meeting, okay? So that, it sounds like we have an idea of what's going on, how to do it, but you really need to sit down and put it in a format. And Stephanie, I've got yours, so maybe that's where we'll start helping each other take a look at these and make sure that we truly understand what each of these areas mean. Okay. Make sense to everybody? Because just talking about it and giving examples, at this moment in time, we understand it until you sit down and actually start writing yours. And then all of a sudden, all the questions start coming out. All right.
Yeah, see if we get the first three things done.
Yes.
A working,
Yes, so that we've got the basics down, we understand that, and then we can move on to the other piece of it. Okay.
So this, looks like they just listed the top of
For the standard concept, yes, the overall, it's not specific, it's just,
not down at the top is,
right,
not even the outcome.
right. It is,
Finding evidence.
what's something back here, big ideas or domains.
Okay.
That's your standard content, the domains of the content from that. What is the domain? So you have